Welcome to the Follow the Leaders podcast, where we get a glimpse into the minds and lives of exceptional leaders and hear about their experiences, insights, and strategies for success. On today's episode, we'll hear from one heart-centered, effective leader and hear about their wisdom and perspective. So get ready to follow along. Welcome back to the podcast. Before we get into today's episode, I have an ask for everyone listening. As you know, on this podcast, I'm talking with professionals working in leadership and business ownership that are doing really inspiring work and making an impact. And I am looking to be connected to the people in your life that you think would add a new and important perspective to the podcast. So if you have a guest suggestion, whether that's you or someone in your personal life or your professional life, I want to hear about it. I'll put my email in the show notes. It's Jamie at Jamie Gale LLC, or you can always send me a DM on social media. It's at Follow the Leaders Pod. I would absolutely love for you to connect me with people who you think listeners of this podcast need to hear from. On to today's topic. As leaders, we juggle so many responsibilities and projects. We come up with new ideas to move our organizations forward, which adds more balls to juggle in the air, and pausing long enough to truly capture our processes and our systems often falls to the wayside. But my guest today is working hard to show leaders why it is important to do those steps, and she is working hard to support entrepreneurs in making it happen. My guest today is Whitney Tatum. Whitney is the founder and CEO of Moxie Entrepreneurial Support Services. Whitney is in the business of supporting people in their entrepreneurial journeys because she believes we don't have to do it alone. From her first job at Dairy Queen to working in the corporate field to joining the Peace Corps and extending a third year as the National Business Coordinator, to managing and growing an international Indigenous festival, to returning to the U.S. and buying into and rapidly growing a business, Whitney's experience working in and on companies is vast, and she understands the needs and challenges small business owners and leaders face daily. Whitney has her bachelor's degree in business management and legal studies from Syracuse University and her certificate in women and gender studies from the University of Massachusetts, Dartmouth. Congratulations on all of your success and impact, Whitney, and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Wow. When you read it, I'm like, wow, that's a lot. It sounds exhausting.
Successful and exhausting. I actually think that everybody listening can identify with that.
Yeah.
So well done. Yeah. So, okay, there's so many topics that I'm eager to talk with you about, but let's start with your current work. Can you fill listeners in on what Moxie is and what your work as the business owner there looks like?
Yeah. So at Moxie, my main goal is helping small business owners and leaders make more money while doing less work. Doesn't that sound amazing? I work with all sorts of kind of business owners, leaders. I do focus on working with boards of nonprofits as well, and EDs and just all kind of people, because what I realized in my life and experience is we could be great leaders. We might not be as detail-oriented as our employees need us to be. We might not be able to articulate what's in our heads in order to get people trained on it, or in the situation of what I like to call, which isn't great, but getting hit by a bus. So what happens if you got hit by a bus tomorrow? Would your organization still be able to function and run? And so that's what Moxie really focuses on, is working with leaders and business owners to get what's in their head out on paper, which allows for so many different things. It frees up your time, allows you to delegate, it gives confidence and empowerment to employees. And it allows you to do what you do best, which is lead or figure out ways to grow the business.
So, okay, fill us in on what are the ways that you support business owners in doing that? So how do you take, hopefully it's not getting hit by a bus, but yes, I know exactly what you mean. It's they need to disappear all of a sudden, can't be at work. How do you help them set things up so that their organization can run?
Yeah. So I really start with an overview of their business processes. So I like doing kind of mind mapping with them and really just kind of talking through what are day to day, what is the lifestyle of a product or a service, and really physically mapping that out for them so they can see all the things they're doing. It allows them to figure out if there's inefficiencies. It allows them to see where they can delegate. And so that's where I really start. And then I kind of, depending on what they need, I work with them to either document their office procedures, so accounting procedures or marketing procedures or sales procedures, the things that the business owner does that they can definitely delegate. Then I also focus on employee stuff. So employee handbooks. you've been a business owner and your employees asked you a million times what the vacation policy is, or those kinds of things. So setting things up on the employee side, also documenting procedures for employee tasks, right? Have you ever had an employee call out or someone call out and no one can cover them because they don't know what they do? And so it's really kind of that first part of just minimizing the risks and errors as well, documenting what's your standards and policies around your brand, around your product, creating consistency just by having this. So it's creating these plug and play documents where, as much as we don't want to look at humans as replaceable, however, if there is that need, I go through and we document all the different things that people do. So that's the procedure side. The policy side is, what are your views of your company? What do you want your company to offer? What are your thoughts on vacations? Again, a lot of states don't make vacations mandatory. So as a business owner, we have to kind of make it look good for people to come work for us. And we want it to be good for people to work for us. But documenting all those things is really important to create a consistent and stable brand. It helps you be able to grow as well.
I love that. All right. I'd love also to hear about how you got into this work. I'm intrigued to hear about your journey to this point. I know a little bit about you from outside of this interview, but this is not your first experience with business ownership, and you've had so many cool career experiences. So what was your path to this point, and how did you get here?
Well, it really started with frustrations as a cake maker at Dairy Queen when I was 16. I, kind of rose among the ranks, and Dairy Queens are franchises. And this was way back in the day. And so the woman would come and train me to make cakes. And then she'd be like, all right, you need to make cakes on these days. And I'm like, okay, well, what if I have a question and you're not here? And she's just like, well, I just showed you. And so what I ended up doing was literally documenting. I would draw pictures of the little cakes and like what ingredients and where they go and how to layer them. And so when I left and transferred the cake making to someone else, it's just like, hey, here you go. And so that was a theme throughout my whole career in work, even in my corporate job. When I would leave, training someone was so daunting and exhausting because there was no training manual on my job. So I ended up creating them because I don't want the next person to have to go through what I did, just figuring it out. So that kind of pain of wanting to be able to help the next person succeed was the basis of it all. What really kind of pushed me to Moxie was when I bought into my previous business. It was a moving company and remodeling company, and I focused on the moving company. It was literally 2 guys and a moving truck. And they were so kind of scattered. They were on a move, taking clients, taking calls. They didn't have a scheduling process. They didn't have a return process. They didn't have an invoicing process. And so they were losing lots of clients. They were losing lots of money. And so during the pandemic, I was working at a restaurant, of course, is shut down. And so I offered to help them manage the phones and schedule. And over the years, the processes and procedures and policies allowed me to be able to actually focus on growing the business, working on the business instead of in the business. When we made enough money, I was able to hire a business manager who did all of the customer scheduling. He handled all the employee scheduling of the movers, taking checks, invoicing. And because he took that load off, I could then work on more marketing and getting out in different chambers. And then what happened was, because of that, we grew so much more. We were able to buy 2 more moving trucks. We got into an office space. I was actually able to hire another office manager to handle. We ended up starting to grow the remodeling company. And so that experience of being super exhausted and wearing all the hats and needing someone to kind of take over, I just kept documenting, this is what I do daily. This is how I do our bookkeeping. This is how I do our marketing. And as a CEO, which I like to call a chief everything officer, you do everything in your small business.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so really kind of taking the time to document each thing I was doing allowed me, when we had enough money to hire someone, to pass it on so I can continue to grow the business. And so once I split off from the company and sold my pieces back, actually during that time, I had helped a couple other business owners that I knew do that kind of stuff. And so really seeing how it improved our lives. So I went from working 10 to 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, down to 4 to 6 hours a day, 4 days a week. And our revenue grew and our income grew, and we were able to do the second year I was there, we both took a month vacation, and everything ran completely smoothly. We did not get one call from someone. We were actually able to detach. And so, yeah, I just really saw kind of the proof in the pudding, right? So not wanting other business owners to go through that pain. I mean, I'm sure there's statistics out there of business owners with stress related health issues because we're burning the candle at both ends. And I believe small businesses are what really runs our world and our communities. So yeah, that's how Moxie came. And I was like, okay, I want to help people. I don't want business owners to stress or businesses to fail because people are just trying to do it themselves.
Yeah. And it's like they keep on going and growing and they don't even think about this. It's like I'm going to say we as business owners, we just go and we grow and then we don't even think about what we need to systematize so that it's not all living in our heads. It doesn't have to be us doing all of the things. Okay. So if someone has been a solopreneur or maybe their team has started to grow, but it's sort of been hand over hand, one task at a time, growing as things go, what is the first area that you see as the place to start if someone is like working with you or they want to take steps on their own? Like, where's the first place? Like, if I was listening to this before I met you, I would be like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. But like, where do I even start? So is there sort of like a first place to go?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I definitely suggest business owners do, and this is what I do for myself and for clients, is just write out your processes. Like write out a day in your life. Make that like org chart or that mind map of, okay, this is how we sell a product. This is from literally when a customer comes in the door till the end of the customer experience, and just start kind of tracking. That's the biggest thing that at least when I've worked with business owners, they're like, that just blew my mind because I saw the things I do. I saw where I could start giving things off. I saw where I had inefficiencies, and there's tons of automations out there now. And so where can you automate? Where can you create, even if you don't have an employee, where can you have either AI or automation help you with that? And so that's the number one step, is have a notebook next to you and start writing down like, okay, this is what I do in a day. Take time. If I had an employee, create that kind of avatar of what that employee would do. And that helps just really clarify things. Because again, like you said, we're constantly go, 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 and that's not sustainable. And so even using technology like Loom videos are great. So as you're doing something, record what you're doing and talk through it. And there you go. There's a training video. There are definitely simple steps that solopreneurs and small business owners can do to at least start the process.
Okay, that's really helpful. And yeah, like you were mentioning, it's not even for someone else to necessarily do, but it just sort of lightens the mental burden. Like, for example, one of my work programs is an after school program. And so we have kids who maybe switch schedules during the course of the year. They contracted for Monday, Wednesday, Friday. They want to switch to Monday, Tuesday, Friday. Even though you'd think, oh, that's just a small change, there are so many dominoes that fall from that one change. We have to change the rosters. We have to notify the school. They have to notify the busing and the teachers, and we have to let our staff know. And if they're a self-sign-out kid, we have to update that. I mean, there's so many dominoes. And that was just living in my head for so long until I was like, okay, make a checklist of what has to get done with every time. And now no steps get missed. I don't have to think while I'm doing it. I just have to check things off the list. So yes, it is so game changing. So I will second that motion for sure.
Checklists are great. Checklists are great, especially if you're starting off. Checklists are also great for processes that you don't do that often. So if you have like a quarterly process you have to do, I've created checklists for people for tax season, right? You do that once a year. What do I have to get my CPA? And so checklists are super awesome because you won't miss something.
Mm-hmm. So what about for someone who's not a linear thinker or whose work involves a lot of creativity, and there is really no one step-by-step system to use. How can someone like that get set up so that they can spend the most amount of time possible doing that creative work if they don't necessarily see their job as linear? Do you see that even people that think there aren't places to systematize, that there really are? Or like how do you kind of approach that?
Yeah, if you think about it, I mean, there's linear processes to everything. I mean, even if just getting up in the morning, right? You brush your teeth, you do this. So outside of that creativity, there is like if you're selling something, right? You got to do your marketing emails or there's a lot of stuff outside of the creativity that has those step by steps that you could do and delegate. I think creative people, I've worked with a design firm, and they said that the biggest hindrance for their designing is having to manage their employees or having to do that checklist of getting this done and this done. And so when we were able to kind of write it out, and that's why I suggest people start with just writing out a day in your life or a week in your life, because you'll see outside of those creative blocks, there's a lot of other things that happen. Another thing too is I work with people to create guidelines. So guidelines aren't your step-by-step procedures. So for example, I work with the law firm, and she's like, okay, well, it's usually case by case or certain things happen. Guidelines help people understand like, okay, if you're doing this creative process or this process, and maybe this happens or these things happens, here's some suggested ways of kind of getting around that. And so it's really a matter of taking what's in your head out on paper, whatever that looks like, so you can replicate it, so someone else can replicate it. Again, if that creative person has specific ways they might be doing a design or something like that, and they want their brand consistent or their designs consistent, and they want to hire another designer, here's my guidelines on this design. And so it's a matter of just, again, freeing up your mental space. Exactly what you said. You don't have to think about it.
Mm-hmm.
The next person feels comfortable. It's giving comfort and confidence. I bet your people are like, okay, if this person reschedules, I know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't need to ask Jamie. And that's the idea, is no matter what the process is, getting it out visually or on paper just helps free up your mental space. It's not in there anymore. It's kind of like when people say, if you're frustrated or stuck, journal, or just getting out what's in your head and freeing up that mental space. That's the important part of it.
Okay. So this is a little bit softer side question, but I think like very, very real. Not every business owner, obviously, if someone is coming to you for help, they don't naturally do these things, or maybe they do and they're just like ready to hand it off to somebody else. But like for the most part, my guess is that you come into situations where these things don't exist. The policies and procedures don't exist. And so I think one barrier for people, or I'm wondering if you find this, that one barrier for people to actually ask for that help is sort of like the embarrassment that it's a mess. It's like the whole, you got to clean for the cleaners type thing. And then you just don't, like, oh my goodness, just like showing someone your messy closet. It's like, it makes sense to me, but like nobody else would find anything in it. And so there is like an emotional piece to it. And so I'm just wondering, like, is that a part of what you end up facing, is doing some of the coaching about like letting you in to see what the closet looks like so that you can help organize it, so to speak? Or are people pretty much ready to rock when they come to you?
No, there's definitely a lot of that. And I kind of have that business owner empathy. I mean, you should have seen the closet that I came into. And like, these guys had a moving truck for 2 years. It didn't have a license plate for 2 years. Okay. And it wasn't registered with the state for a year. And so I've seen it. And for me, kind of what I do is, and it's actually really funny, and I don't tell many people this, but originally when I named Moxie, the acronym, if you look at it, is MESS. And Moxie Entrepreneurial Support Services. And originally a tagline I wanted to be, I will help clean your business mess. But some people in the business are probably like, you probably shouldn't like call people out for their mess. But that's the thing. I'm a very I have that business owner empathy. I totally understand. And so as business owners and as leaders, because we're so used to leading, we do have a hard time asking for help or kind of letting people into our closets. And so it's one of those things where I just talk with people through what's going on. Just, hey, what's going on in your business? And they might be like, oh, well, I'm having a lot of employee turnover, or I'm working too long. And kind of my questions will have them lead me to the closet. And there's also a lot of things I deal with too is you created this. It's like your business is like your baby, right? And as you have your baby grow, it's hard to see your baby kind of move on, right? But what I help is you teach your child how to be a human in the world, right? Mm-hmm. And the idea is you want to teach your business how to live in the world on its own 2 feet as well. So you can go do the things that you want to do. So it really is, business owners do have to admit that they need help is just the first thing they have to admit when they come to me. All the other stuff, I'm very good at kind of asking those questions because I've been there. I've definitely been there. And it's one of those things where I was talking to a business owner. I was like, hey, what does your day look like by 10:30 in the morning? Right? You have this whole list and you're like ready to go, and you open at 8, and by 10:30 you haven't even been able to look at the list because of all these other things. So yeah, there is some pride and stuff to get through. But again, a good leader to me also looks at their own weaknesses. And just because you're not a linear thinker, just because you're not organized, that's not a weakness. It's just not where your focal point is, right? And that's what I do. I like creative stuff, but I put me in front of a document and computers and I'm happy.
Well, and something that just popped in as you were talking, it's like, yeah, if somebody has gotten to the place where they are leading an organization or they are running a business that is growing and successful, they got there because of their skills, not because of the things that they're not as good at. And so allowing someone like you or to come in and help support the areas that are their weaknesses, we can just call it the things that they're not as good at, allows them to focus more on their strengths. So that's actually, I'm glad that we had this conversation because it is a reframe. It's like we put this unrealistic pressure on ourselves to be great at everything, when we're leading a company or an organization. And in reality, like, we got there because of the things we're good at.
Right. And if you think about it, do you want to be doing, like, if you really think about it, like, why did you start this business, or why are you leading this business? Because you have this passion and this drive for creating or leveraging or leading. Do you really want to be mired and bogged down by all the other little things that you need to do? It's kind of like you have a plumber, right? Like, you could probably go on YouTube and figure it out if you want to do that, but why your strength is maybe being a painter, right? Why would you do that? Just because you can do everything doesn't necessarily mean you should do everything. And so, yeah, it's taking that, and again, as leaders, humbling ourselves, and business owners being like, okay, I love doing documents. I love sitting in front of my computer. I don't love marketing. I don't love social media. So I want to find someone to do that stuff for me because it's not my skill and it's not what I want to be doing. And so you hire employees to do things that you don't want to do. It's kind of along those lines.
Okay. Well, I love that. All right. So I know that your caseload or your client load probably changes as you take on different projects, but if you were to put out a call for your perfect client, your perfect next client, who would that be? Who is the perfect person to come and be like, Whitney, I'm your next mess to fix? Who is your ideal client?
Yeah, it's that business or business owner that has gotten to a point where they're kind of saturated. So they're grown. So they might be 3 years in, up to 5 years in. And that 5 years is that pivotal point where you're grown and you're like, oh my gosh, like you're fine. Like you have all this stuff in your hand and you're just like, you're stagnant because you can't take that next step because you're carrying all of this stuff. So that 5 to 7 years is really that sweet spot where business owners can really grow sustainably, hire people, business owners that are bringing on their first, second, or third employee. Your employees are a mirror of your mess, right? Just like in relationships, people in our lives are mirrors of our own messes. And so if you're that business owner that's like exhausted or tired of interruptions or wants a vacation. So if you're a business owner at that point of either saturation where your company is grown, but you can't handle it or can't manage it, or it's running away from you, right? Crisis mode. If you're in that crisis mode, you want that vacation. Those are really good clients because they're at that point where it can really help them and it can really propel them forward. And I help them kind of take that next step, be like, all right, let's get all this stuff off. And that way you're free to kind of start focusing on other things.
Okay, awesome. Well, I have a feeling that will resonate with a lot of our listeners. So, well, we will put all of Whitney's information in the show notes so you can reach out to her and chat about possibilities. But I have a handful of sort of more rapid fire questions for you.
All right, let's do it.
Okay. What is a leadership lesson or a lesson overall that you have learned the hard way?
Setting your employees up for success, as well as kind of protecting yourself. We had an employee that was disgruntled and gave them their performance improvement, worked with them for 6 months. They ended up quitting. They ended up trying to do a lawsuit against us, which ended up getting thrown out because we showed them the process. We said, here's our employee handbook. Here's what they signed. Here's their improvement thing. And so, yeah, that was the biggest thing as a leader, is like wanting to set them up for confidence and empowerment, but also protecting yourself and your investment as a business owner.
All right. Does anyone come to mind that you could shout out who believed in your leadership skills, even maybe before you did?
Paula Rothfuss was my first kind of corporate boss. I was doing a temp project for her, mailing, and her admin assistant was leaving. And she came into my office and I had finished the temp project like a week early. She's like, hey, my admin's leaving. I think you got what you got. And so she hired me and just worked with me to teach me. So she was, and then all the people I've had in corporate world have always kind of seen and helped promote me. But Paula is probably the first in my big girl pants.
Okay. I love that. I love that. All right. This is probably a dangerous question because there's probably not one answer for this, but is there personally one tool that you use to stay organized and effective, like a tech tool or paper tool?
Yes. So I became a Remarkable user. Remarkable is a digital notebook. And I love writing, but I found like all my notes for clients or just notes in general are everywhere. And Remarkable has changed my life. I have this thin little pad. It goes into the cloud. I can make folders. I can draw. I mean, it has changed my life. I'm not getting paid to promote Remarkable.
Not yet.
If they want me to, I will.
All right. Is there a favorite leadership book or podcast or resource that you go to for inspiration?
Because I'm a small business owner, I don't have a lot of time to read and stuff. And the podcasts I tend to choose are mindless and funny. Okay. But my LinkedIn feed is really huge for me. I got off a lot of social medias and I've started following some really inspiring people that just were amazing. One of the books that I do recommend is called Professional Troublemaker by, I believe it's Lovey Jones. And it is fantastic. As women leaders, we're constantly kind of trying to push against the norms of society. And that book just gives you kind of the confidence. I really like the audio version because Lovey does it herself and she's sassy and awesome. But that's a really good book as well.
Okay. Amazing. I will add it to my to read list and I will add it to the show notes. So that is fantastic. All right. My last question for you is, if you had a day off, like totally off, where you could accomplish nothing for yourself or any of your clients, you had to just take a day completely off, what is one activity that you would do and one place you'd go to get something to eat?
Ooh. So it's funny. This is what I did for my birthday a couple months ago. So I went to a local bagel place to get a bagel and lox because I'm originally from the East Coast. So I miss a good bagel and lox and capers and tomato on a pumpernickel bagel, and then take my dog to the mountains to play in the snow. I love the snow. I love the mountains. And so, yeah, that is my perfect day.
Okay, amazing. Well, I love it. All right, Whitney, thank you so much for being here. I always love talking to you, and I feel like this is a topic that'll be helpful for so many of the listeners. Can you please share where people can reach out to you? Where we'll link everything in the show notes, but if someone wants to look you up right away, where can they do that?
Well, yeah, first, thanks for having me. This is awesome. I'm very, very grateful. You can find me. My website is Moxie Supports with an S, MoxieSupports.com. There's a contact form. You can reach out. You can schedule something right away or reach out via email. And I'm quite, what's the word I'm looking for? Active on LinkedIn. So if you just search Whitney Tatum or Moxie Entrepreneurial Support Services, you can find me on LinkedIn.
And everybody, even if you're not ready for her services yet, everybody has to go look at Whitney's website because it is bright, it is colorful, it is playful. And just like if you're watching a video of a clip online about this, the boards behind her are bright and colorful. Her website is similar colors. So you got to check that out. That just kind of sums up Whitney's great personality. So make sure you take a look. It's sort of rewriting what you expect from an entrepreneurial website. It just has flavor and personality, and I just love it so much. And I love talking to you, Whitney. Thank you again, and thank you to all the listeners. We'll be back next time with another inspiring interview.
Thank you.
Follow the Leaders is produced by Lit Path Studios, and music is by Shane Ivers. You can hear more about this show and all the other podcasts at Lit Path Studios by going to www.litpathstudios.com.